My husband told me to skip our high school reunion because I still look pregnant, then laughed at me on the phone with another woman. When I confronted him, he smirked and said, "You're right, you should stay home. Who would want to see that?" I just stared at him. That was 2 months ago. Last night, he was crying on his phone while I blocked him for good. I was getting my toes done for my husband and I's high school reunion. Nothing fancy, just a simple ballet pink coat and some exfoliation. If you know, you know. The nail tech was massaging my postpartum Shrek feet when my phone buzzed. It was my husband. "Hey, since you still look pregnant and chubby, I think you should skip the reunion. I don't want people thinking I married someone who let herself go." I was trying so hard not to cry, but it didn't work. We had been together since high school. That's when the girl getting her acrylics done handed me a Kleenex. "Hey, my love. Are you okay?" I couldn't even speak. Just turned my phone toward her to show her our conversation. Suddenly, she yanked my phone out of my hands and started FaceTiming him. "Hey, is this Anthony?" "Yeah, I'm here with your beautiful wife." And, "Oh, hey, who's this?" He cut her off. "You look cute. If my wife looked anything like you, we wouldn't have any problems." That man had the audacity to laugh after he said it, like it was the funniest thing in the world. The entire salon went dead silent. She hung up immediately, her face pure disgust. "Girls," the nail tech announced loudly, "we have a code red situation." Every woman in that damn salon turned around to face me. The lady with foils in her hair, the woman mid-lip wax, everyone. Mia, the salon owner, told me to text him back that I was staying home. Nothing else. I typed with shaking fingers. "You're right. Staying home tonight." His response was instant. "Good girl." That's when the salon exploded. The woman getting highlights owned one of the biggest homemade dress stores on Etsy. She insisted I take the red dress from her site, the 400 one. The eyebrow lady's daughter who did makeup for the news station was clearing her schedule. A college girl's mom could watch the baby. The girl who FaceTimed him called in sick to work to be my +1. 2 other women getting petties were coming as backup. Mia locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "Ladies, we have 5 hours to make this man regret his entire existence." The transformation started immediately. Hair extensions for my postpartum hair loss, spray tan for that glow, professional makeup that made my cheekbones look bonita. They taught me how to walk in heels again, made me practice my entrance over and over. "Girl, put your shoulders back. You literally pushed a whole human out of your body 3 months ago. You can do anything." The boutique owner returned with the dress and shapewear. Not because I needed it, but because it would make me feel incredible. The reunion was at the Hilton downtown. He'd been there an hour already, according to his Instagram story. We walked in at 8:30, and there he was with some blonde girl, his hand on her lower back, introducing her to our old classmates. I froze. The girl who FaceTimed him grabbed my hand, and we followed them to the bathroom hallway. The blonde went into the ladies' room. We went in after her. "Hey, sorry, weird question. Are you here with Anthony?" "Yeah, we matched on Hinge 3 days ago. He's cute, isn't he?" She giggled. The silence was deafening. "I'm his wife." Her face went white, then red. Are you, Mike, serious right now?" Her acrylic nails aggressively tapped against her screen as she went into their conversation. He told her he was single, that he hadn't felt like this in years, and he's been waiting for someone like her for his entire life. Every woman in that bathroom was seeing red, even random girls from other classes who were just trying to pee. "Girl, this man is a geometry idiot. You're beautiful," the blonde shouted, taking my hand and twirling me around like, "Hello? If I was him, I would be lining the red carpet for you every single morning." She stormed out and walked straight up to him in front of everyone. The DJ had just turned the music down for announcements. Perfect timing. "You're on Hinge while you have a wife." She threw her cocktail in his face. "A wife who just had your baby?" The entire gymnasium went silent. "You told me you were single, that you were practically falling in love with me." I stepped forward. "We have a baby girl at home, Anthony." His old English teacher, Miss Bradley, was standing right there asking if this was true. His ex-girlfriend, Bethany, called out that she'd dodged a bullet. Like, girl, period, you definitely just say did. The principal's wife remembered him and said it was disgraceful. Every woman in that room was staring at him. He was stammering, soaking wet, looking around for any support. He ran, literally ran out of there. I danced until midnight with my new salon sisters. The Hinge girl stuck around and we actually became friends. But then my phone started buzzing and I was low-key hoping it was my old hallway crush who was standing across the room looking delicious as ever. Unfortunately, it was just my lousy ex-husband. I told you to stay home for a reason, you hormonal. First you refuse to lose weight, then you humiliate me. The messages just kept coming, each one more unhinged than the last, but I didn't type a single word back. Instead, I just screenshotted everything, opened our family group chat where his mom, sisters, and aunts were all waiting for reunion photos. I forwarded every single one, LOL. His mom had just had her fourth baby 6 months ago, and I knew once she saw those texts, he was done for. The family group chat went absolutely insane within seconds, and I just stood there watching the typing bubbles appear and disappear while Jenna grabbed my hand and told me we should probably get out of there before Anthony came back. We ended up at IHOP at 2 a.m., with half the salon girls ordering pancakes and hash browns, while my phone kept lighting up with messages from his aunts calling him disgusting, and his cousins saying they always knew something was off about him. His sister Maria was the only one defending him, saying I must have done something to make him act that way, which made his mom Linda go off in all caps about how no woman deserves to be treated like trash after having a baby. I finally crashed at Jenna's place around 4 a.m. with a baby in her pack and play that she'd borrowed from her sister earlier. My phone woke me up at 7 a.m. Vibrating non-stop with 47 missed calls from Maria, who left me this crazy voicemail screaming that I'd destroyed their family WhatsApp with my lies and that I was a bitter cow trying to ruin her brother's reputation. The baby started crying right as I heard Anoni's car screech into the driveway outside, and I knew he'd been at his mom's house all night getting absolutely destroyed by her because Linda doesn't play when it comes to disrespecting women. He started pounding on Jenna's door so hard the whole frame was shaking, and I could hear him yelling that I better open up right now. Jenna was already up making coffee, and she just looked at me and said to start packing the baby stuff while she handled this wool. I grabbed the diaper bag and started shoving formula and clothes in there while Anthony kept screaming through the door that I was going to retract everything I'd sent to his family or he'd make my life hell. Jenna opened the door but kept the chain on and told him he needed to leave before she called the cops. He tried to push past her, but the chain held, and that's when he saw me holding the baby and completely lost it. "You're not taking my daughter anywhere," he shouted and tried to reach through the gap in the door. Jenna slammed it in his face and immediately started recording on her phone while he kept pounding and yelling threats about how he was going to make me regret humiliating him. She opened the door again with her phone up, and he didn't even notice at first, just kept screaming about how I was a fat psycho who couldn't handle the truth. And that's when 3 neighbors came outside, including Mrs. Smith from 2 doors down, who asked really loudly if she should call 911. Anthony finally saw all the phones pointed at him and immediately changed his whole tone, backing away and saying we could talk about this like adults. He practically ran to his car and peeled out while Jenna was already posting the video to her Instagram story. We went back inside, and I finally felt like I could breathe for the first time since seeing those text messages. Jenna's apartment smelled like vanilla candles, and she had Vietnamese takeout waiting that she'd ordered while I was sleeping. She showed me to her spare room, where her sister had already set up a whole pack and play with sheets and even a little mobile hanging over it. The baby fell asleep almost immediately, and I just sat there on the bed feeling safe for the first time in months. 3 hours later, my phone started going crazy with notifications because someone had grabbed Jenna's live stream and posted it to our neighborhood Facebook group. The comments were pouring in from women I'd never even met saying Anthony had hit on them at the gym, at the grocery store, even at daycare pickup when I was home with the baby. One woman said he'd asked for her number at the gas station while her husband was pumping gas, and another said he'd tried to add her on Instagram with some gross message about how she was way hotter than his wife. Then Derek, Anoni's best friend since middle school, texted me these screenshots from their group chat that made me physically sick. Anthony had been bragging about training me to stay home and not go out so he could do whatever he wanted. He'd been sharing photos of women from dating apps and asking the guys to rate them while calling me a 4 at best after the baby and saying he deserved better. The worst part was him joking about how he'd convinced me that losing the baby weight was impossible, so I wouldn't even try. The next day, Linda showed up at Jenna's apartment with her own baby in a carrier and a whole bag of formula and diapers. She pulled me into this huge hug and kept apologizing for raising such a piece of crap son while her baby was making these cute little noises. Wait, how did the whole salon instantly organize like that? The way everyone dropped what they were doing. The lady with foils, the one getting waxed to help a stranger, is incredible. What made them all unite so fast? She handed me a business card for her divorce lawyer and said she'd already called to let them know I'd be coming in. "I raised that boy better than this," she said while holding my hand. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you call me." 2 days later, I was sitting in the lawyer's waiting room with a baby fussing in my lap while I tried to fill out all these forms about assets and custody preferences and grounds for divorce. My hand was literally shaking as I wrote emotional abuse and infidelity in the little boxes. Ms. Rodriguez, the lawyer, was this tiny woman who looked like she could destroy someone in court. And she went through all the Texas divorce laws about community property and how the text messages plus Jenna's video were perfect for proving emotional abuse. She said I could probably get alimony and definitely child support. But then she mentioned the filing fee was $300 and I realized I didn't even have that much in my account. That's when I tried to use my debit card at the pharmacy later to buy formula and it got declined. I called the bank and they said Anthony had withdrawn everything from our joint account that morning. All $8,400 gone at 9 a.m., right after I'd left the house with Jenna. The pharmacy tech was staring at me while I stood there holding the declined card and my crying baby who needed formula right now. I handed her the last 20 from my wallet and she gave me back 3 change, which meant I had exactly 3 to my name. Back at Jenna's apartment, I was mixing the formula when Mia texted me asking if I'd seen what she posted online. She'd started a GoFundMe called Help a New Mom Escape Emotional Abuse and attached the reunion video someone had taken of Ashley throwing her drink in Anoni's face. Within 2 hours, it had 3,000 from salon clients and neighbors and complete strangers commenting about their own experiences with trash men. People were sharing it everywhere, and the number kept climbing every time I refreshed the page. My phone buzzed with a message from Ashley on day 3, and she'd sent me screenshots that made my stomach drop. Anthony had profiles on Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, Match, and OkCupid, all created when I was 7 months pregnant with his bio saying entrepreneur, no kids, looking for something real. The profile pictures were from our vacation to Cancun last year where I'd been taking all the photos, so I wasn't in any of them. At 2 hours in the morning, my mom called me screaming that Anthony was at her house, pounding on the doors and windows, demanding to know where I was hiding. Her security camera caught him kicking her garden gnome into pieces while yelling that I was poisoning everyone against him, and he'd make me pay for ruining his life. The cops showed up, but he was already gone by the time they got there, and Mom was shaking so bad she couldn't hold her phone steady during our video call. The next morning, I went to the police station with all the footage and text messages to file for a restraining order, but the officer said it would take 2 to 3 days to process unless there was immediate physical danger. The baby needed a diaper change right there in the station, and I didn't have any wipes left, so I had to use paper towels from the bathroom, which made her cry even harder. Jenna and I worked out a routine where she did her marketing job from home while I took care of both babies, and her sister brought groceries every few days. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours straight since leaving Anthony, but somehow I felt safer than I had in months, even though my body ached everywhere. Day 5. Anthony posted on Instagram that I was mentally unstable from postpartum depression and had kidnapped our daughter, tagging my employer and all my cousins and college friends. He wrote this long post about being worried for the baby's safety with a crying emoji and saying he just wanted his family back. My boss texted asking if I was okay because Anthony had called the office claiming I was having a breakdown and needed psychiatric help. She said she didn't believe him, but HR needed documentation about the situation for their records, which meant more paperwork I didn't have energy for. That's when Anani's mom, Linda, exploded in the family group chat, posting all his dating profiles and the screenshots everyone had been sending her. His Aunt Teresa replied saying she knew something was off when he missed Easter for a work emergency that she now realized was probably another woman. The whole family started choosing sides with his cousins calling him disgusting, while his brother defended him saying, "I must have driven him to it." 1 week after the reunion, the restraining order finally got approved, and the sheriff served Anthony at his office right in front of all his coworkers and his boss. He texted from his work phone saying I'd made a huge mistake and this wasn't over, but Miss Rodriguez from the legal aid office told me to screenshot everything and not respond. While packing more of my things from storage, I found Anoni's old laptop in a box, and when I opened it, his email was still logged in. My finger hovered over the inbox because looking might help my case, but it also felt wrong even after everything he'd done. The baby started crying before I could decide. So I closed the laptop and went to feed her instead. While she ate, my phone started buzzing with Facebook messages from 3 different women in our neighborhood group. The first one, Sarah, from 2 streets over, sent screenshots of messages Anthony sent her at the gym last year. He'd asked if she wanted a workout partner and said I was too lazy to exercise with him anymore. The second woman, Jennifer, said he showed up at the community pool every time she was there with her kids. She had photos of him sitting right next to her, even though the whole pool area was empty. The third one, Amy, forwarded texts from 2 years ago where he asked her to coffee and said he was thinking about leaving me. I screenshot everything and added it to the folder Rodriguez told me to make. 3 days later, I was at the grocery store buying formula when someone started recording me with their phone. Anoni's sister, Maria, was standing in the cereal aisle pointing her camera at me while the baby slept in her car seat. She walked right up to me and started yelling about how I was destroying her brother's life. She said I was just mad about baby weight and trying to get revenge. Other shoppers stopped and stared as she got louder and closer to the baby. An older man stepped between us and told her to back off. The store manager came over and made Maria leave while I stood there shaking. That night, Mia showed up at Jenna's apartment with a schedule she'd made. Every single woman from the salon had signed up for shifts to check on me. They brought dinners in disposable containers so I wouldn't have to wash dishes. They held the baby while I showered. They sat with me while I cried about everything falling apart. Mia's daughter worked as a paralegal and offered to organize all my evidence for free. She made folders for everything and taught me how to document each incident properly. On day 10, I finally went back to Anoni's laptop while the baby napped. His browser history made my stomach drop. He'd been searching Father's Rights Texas and how to prove mother unfit for weeks. There were also searches for apartments near work from 3 months ago before the baby was even born. He'd been planning to leave us the whole time. 2 days later, a delivery guy knocked on Jenna's door with a huge flower arrangement. The card said, "Please come home. I'll change. Think of our daughter." The delivery guy took a photo of me holding them before I realized what was happening. Rodriguez said this was evidence Anthony knew where I was staying, which violated the restraining order. We filed a report that afternoon. The next morning, my phone at work wouldn't stop ringing. My boss said someone kept calling and asking for me, then hanging up when transferred. HR counted 17 calls in one morning from different numbers. They traced them all back to burner phones bought with cash. My supervisor pulled me aside and suggested I take unpaid leave until things settled down. I couldn't afford to not work, but I also couldn't risk Anthony showing up at my job. 2 weeks after the reunion, someone knocked on Jenna's door. A woman with a clipboard said she was from CPS investigating a report of child endangerment. The complaint said I was unstable and living with strangers who might hurt the baby. She wanted to come in right away to check on things. The baby had a diaper rash from a new brand of diapers, and I hadn't showered in 3 days. My hair was greasy, and I had formula stains on my shirt. The investigator, Mrs. McWilliams, looked around the apartment taking notes on her clipboard. She checked the baby's crib, looked through the diaper supplies, and watched me change her. She said the baby looked healthy and the environment was safe. She also said the complaint seemed retaliatory, and she saw this pattern all the time in custody disputes. She would close the case as unfounded, but warned me to document everything. After she left, I couldn't stop checking the door locks. Every car that passed made me jump. The baby started crying more than usual, picking up on my stress. At 3 in the morning, Jenna found me standing by the window with a kitchen knife, watching the parking lot. She made me put the knife down and helped me back to bed. The next day, my cousin texted me screenshots from Instagram. Someone had made a fake account using my name and posted our honeymoon photos. The caption said things like, "Missing my husband and postpartum made me crazy." 60 people had already liked the posts, including some of Anoni's co-workers. My cousin reported the account, but Instagram said it could take weeks to remove. Rodriguez added it to our evidence file and said this showed a pattern of harassment. The mother-in-law giving her son's wife a divorce lawyer card is such an unusual move. I wonder how many times she's seen warning signs before this moment. 3 days later, Mr. Rodriguez called me while I was feeding the baby at Linda's house. She'd filed an emergency motion about the fake Instagram account and asked the judge for a restraining order. The hearing wouldn't happen for 3 weeks because the court calendar was packed. Meanwhile, Anthony could still legally enter our house whenever he wanted since his name was on the deed. That same afternoon, I went to check our mail and found a stack of credit card statements I'd never seen before. 3 different cards, all in my name, with allowances maxed out at $6,000 each. The charges showed dating app subscriptions, fancy restaurants, hotel rooms, and jewelry purchases dating back over a year. My hands shook as I added up a total debt of $18,000. The credit card company said I needed to file a police report for fraud before they'd investigate. Linda drove me to the police station the next morning with a folder of bank statements she'd been keeping. She showed the officers how she'd been sending Anthony money every month for the past 3 years to help with our bills. He'd told her I was terrible with money and kept spending everything on stupid stuff. She'd believed him and never asked me about it directly. The fraud report took 2 hours to complete with all the documentation we had to provide. That evening, while Linda was making dinner, the baby looked up at her cat and smiled for the first time since we'd left home. Not just a gas smile, but a real gummy grin that lit up her whole face. I started crying so hard I couldn't breathe because maybe she wouldn't remember any of this chaos. Jenna grabbed her phone and recorded the whole thing. Our first happy moment in weeks. 5 days later, I had to go back to the house with 2 police officers to get more of our things. Anthony had changed all the locks, even though the lawyers said that was illegal. The locksmith took 40 minutes to get us inside. The nursery carpet was ruined with bleach stains everywhere. My wedding dress was cut into pieces on the bedroom floor. Every single photo from our albums was ripped or had my face scratched out. The officers took pictures of everything while I packed what clothes weren't destroyed. In the baby's room, he'd poured paint on her crib mattress and thrown all her stuffed animals in the trash. I grabbed what I could salvage while the officers documented each damaged item for their report. That night, I got a Facebook message from someone named Rachel, who said she was Dererick's girlfriend. She'd been secretly recording Anthony and Dererick's conversations for months because she was worried about Dererick's influence. She had audio files of Anthony bragging about keeping me in line and making sure I knew my place. Another recording had him discussing ways to hide money before filing for divorce. She sent me 15 different files through a secure link and said she'd testify if needed. I started keeping a notebook of everything that happened with dates, times, and witness names. The stack of evidence grew thicker every day. But Miss Rodriguez warned me that family court didn't always care about emotional abuse. She said judges wanted to see direct threats to the child's safety, not just bad behavior toward me. 2 weeks later, Anoni's company put him on administrative leave after someone sent them the reunion video that had gone viral on LinkedIn. He sent a mass email to everyone we knew claiming I was having a mental breakdown and destroying an innocent man. People forwarded it to me all day long, some offering support and others asking if I needed psychological help. Linda hired a private investigator named Marcus without telling me until he'd already found things. Marcus discovered Anthony had profiles on 5 different dating sites that he'd been using during business trips for years. There was a second phone he kept at his office and a post office box where he had credit cards sent. The pattern started 6 months before our wedding, according to the timestamps Marcus found. Then, exactly 1 month after the reunion, I got served with legal papers at Linda's house. Anthony had filed for emergency custody, claiming I was mentally unstable and had kidnapped our daughter. His lawyer attached the CPS report from their visit and called my leaving the house abandonment of the marriage. The court date was set for 2 weeks away, and Ms. Rodriguez said this was going to get ugly fast. The salon turned into our headquarters that same afternoon, with Mia clearing out the back room and setting up whiteboards to track everything. She took charge of posting updates on social media, while Jenna started calling every single person from the reunion who saw what happened. Ashley handled the GoFundMe page, and Linda worked her church connections to find character witnesses who knew what kind of father Anthony really was. We had evidence boards with timelines and printed screenshots and color-coded folders for different types of proof. Rachel, one of the stylists, pulled me aside 3 days later with her phone in her hand and a sick look on her face. She played a voice recording from last year's company Christmas party where Anthony was drunk and talking to his buddy Derek about how I trapped him with a baby. His exact words were that he'd trade up once the kid was born and find someone younger who didn't let herself go. Derek laughed and called me the practice wife while Anthony said he was just waiting for the right time to leave. My hand shook so bad I dropped the phone and had to sit down while Rachel rubbed my back. The next morning, I drove to the public library and spent 6 hours researching Texas custody laws on their computers. I learned about right of first refusal, which meant he couldn't leave the baby with his mom without offering me time first. Supervised visitation was possible if I could prove he was unfit, and guardian ad litem appointments meant the court would assign someone to represent the baby's interests. The librarian kept bringing me water and snacks after she noticed me crying over the custody statutes. Knowledge felt like putting on armor piece by piece, even though my eyes burned from staring at legal websites. Day 35 came, and Linda picked me up to teach me basic car maintenance in her driveway. She showed me how to check the oil and change it while telling me Anthony never learned because he expected other people to handle everything for him. We talked about raising boys versus girls, and she admitted she failed with Anthony, but promised she wouldn't make the same mistakes with her new baby. She said watching me fight for my daughter made her realize how passive she'd been as a mother. 2 days later, Anoni's lawyer sent over a settlement offer that made Miss Rodriguez laugh out loud when she read it. I'd get the baby, but he'd keep the house we bought together. No alimony despite me being a stay-at-home mom, and we'd split the debt equally. Ms. Rodriguez called it insulting, but warned me that trials were expensive and the GoFundMe had stalled at $8,000. She said I might have to consider accepting something close to this if we couldn't afford to keep fighting. I started posting everything on Instagram and Facebook to create a record of my daily Childare routine. Every feeding time got photographed, every doctor visit documented, every milestone recorded with timestamps and locations. The posts started getting hundreds of comments from strangers who were following the whole story and offering support. People I'd never met were sharing my posts and tagging lawyers they knew who might help Pruno. Day 40 arrived with Anthony showing up at the baby's 4-month checkup, claiming father's rights to medical information. He made such a scene when the doctor refused to discuss anything without my consent that security had to escort him out. The incident went straight into the medical record, and the doctor wrote a detailed note about his aggressive behavior. The receptionist gave me a copy of the security footage on a USB drive without me even asking for it. Miss Rodriguez filed subpoenas for Anoni's phone records, all his dating app data, and 3 years of credit card statements. The legal fees hit $5,000 that week, and I was about to tell her to stop when Linda quietly wrote a check for the full amount. She said to consider it her apology for raising him wrong and not teaching him how to be a decent human being. Every night I had the same dream about walking into that reunion and seeing him with Ashley across the room. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if I should have just stayed home like he told me to. Jenna came over one morning after I texted her about the dreams and reminded me that compliance wouldn't have changed who he was. She said even if I'd stayed home that night, he still would have been on dating apps and planning to leave. The custody hearing finally arrived 6 weeks after he filed, and Anthony showed up in a brand new suit with 5 guys from his gym. They all testified they'd never seen him be anything but devoted to his family, which was funny since none of them had ever met me or the baby. I had 50 pages of documentation printed and bound, 12 witnesses, including his own mother, and boxes of evidence about his behavior. The judge spent 10 minutes reviewing everything, while Anthony kept trying to interrupt and explain his side of things. The judge finally looked up from the papers and said she was ordering a custody evaluation that would cost $3,500 split between us. Anthony actually smirked when she said that because he knew I couldn't afford $1,750 on my own. Then she dropped the real bomb and said the baby would have temporary joint custody starting immediately until the evaluation was done. My stomach dropped to the floor because that meant my 3-month-old would be spending nights at his lace. The hearing ended, and I walked out of that courthouse feeling like the whole legal system had just failed me completely. The way Rachel kept that recording from the Christmas party for a whole year makes me wonder if she'd been watching Anoni's behavior for a long time. Did she know something bad would happen and wanted proof ready? Within 2 hours, Mia had already posted about it on the salon's Facebook page asking for help with the evaluation fee. By the next morning, they'd raised over $2,000 through Venmo and people dropping cash at the salon. The news station picked up the story and ran it as their feel-good segment about community support for a local mom. Anani's reputation was getting worse by the day as more people learned what he'd done to me and the baby. Day 45 came, and it was time for the first overnight with Anthony, which meant I had to pack her diaper bag. I put in extra formula and diapers and her favorite stuffed elephant that helped her sleep at night. Jenna came over that evening to keep me company because she knew I wouldn't be able to handle it alone. She brought knitting needles and yarn and tried teaching me how to make a scarf to keep my hands busy. I kept checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for Anthony to text that something was wrong with the baby. By morning, I'd made half of the ugliest scarf you've ever seen and cried through 3 boxes of tissues. When Anthony brought her back the next afternoon, she had the worst diaper rash I'd ever seen on a baby. She was still wearing the same outfit from yesterday and was crying because she was so hungry she couldn't calm down. He stood at my door claiming she'd cried all night and maybe she was sick from my neglect somehow. I took photos of everything, including the empty formula bottle he brought back, and called the pediatrician immediately for documentation. 3 days later, the custody evaluator, Dr. A. Park, came to interview me at my apartment for 3 hours straight. She asked about every single detail of Anoni's involvement during my pregnancy and the birth and those early months. I showed her receipts for everything I'd bought for the baby, including the crib and car seat and clothes. I had screenshots showing I went to every doctor appointment alone while he was on dating apps during my actual delivery. She took notes on her laptop and asked to see the baby's room and where she slept and played. The next week, Dr. Park made a surprise visit to Anoni's apartment to check his living situation for the baby. She found no crib and no baby supplies, except a pack and play shoved in his hall closet still in the box. His refrigerator had nothing but beer and old takeout containers and not a single thing for a baby to eat. He tried telling her I'd sabotaged him by not giving him any supplies, but she just kept writing in her notebook. Around day 52, Rachel called me out of nowhere, saying she had something important to tell me about Anthony. She came over with 3 other girlfriends from Anoni's friend group, and they all had recordings and screenshots to share. They called their boyfriends the Brotherhood of Misogyny because they all encouraged each other to treat women like garbage. The evidence went back 5 years showing how they'd share tips on controlling their girlfriends and keeping them insecure. One girl had recordings of her boyfriend bragging about how Anthony taught him to make me feel worthless after having the baby. They gave me copies of everything and said they'd testify if needed because they were done protecting these awful men. 2 days later, I was at Target buying diapers when I literally ran into James from high school in the baby aisle. He'd heard about everything happening with Anthony and said he never understood what I saw in that guy anyway. He was being really sweet and said I deserved better. But then I noticed his wedding ring when he reached for something. He wished me well and walked away, and I stood there thinking about how different life could have been with someone decent. That same week, Anoni's company fired him after the LinkedIn video went viral, and multiple women from his office filed harassment complaints. He posted this crazy Facebook rant blaming me for ruining his life and threatening to take full custody now that he was unemployed. He actually called himself a stay-at-home dad, like he'd been taking care of the baby this whole time instead of neglecting her. Ms. Rodriguez filed contempt charges against him for violating the restraining order and destroying my property and the financial fraud with the accounts. She warned me that criminal charges were possible, but that might make him more desperate and dangerous than he already was. 3 days later, Miss Rodriguez called me into her office, and I could tell from her face something was up. She slid a document across her desk, and when I read it, I started laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. Anthony was actually asking me for spousal support because apparently I had destroyed his career and reputation, and now he needed alimony to survive. The laughing turned into crying, and Ms. Rodriguez handed me tissues while explaining this was actually pretty common with abusers who like to flip the script and play victim. Meanwhile, Dr. Park was doing her custody investigation and interviewing everyone who knew us. She talked to the daycare workers who confirmed I did every single drop-off and pickup. While Anthony never even knew the teachers' names, our pediatrician showed her records proving I brought the baby to every appointment alone, and Anthony had never once called to ask about her health. 3 different neighbors told her about seeing Anthony leave for his supposed work trip that matched up perfectly with his dating app activity and hotel charges. Linda came to my apartment the next week carrying old photo albums from Anoni's childhood. She showed me pictures of him throwing tantrums at birthday parties when other kids got presents, screaming at his little sister for touching his toys, and one where he was mid-meltdown because someone else won a game. She kept saying she gave him everything he wanted and never made him face consequences. And now she realized she created this monster. We sat there for an hour just looking at these photos of a kid who grew up to be exactly who he always was. Then Anoni's new lawyer sent a cease and desist letter threatening to sue me for defamation over the social media posts for $100,000. Ms. Rodriguez actually laughed out loud when she read it and said, "Truth was an absolute defense, so let him try." But my hands were shaking because even though I knew I was telling the truth, the threat still scared me. The contempt hearing finally came and we all filed into the courthouse. Anthony stood there claiming every single violation was just a misunderstanding, and I was being vindictive and trying to ruin his life. The judge looked through all the evidence, including photos of my destroyed clothes, documentation of the restraining order violations, and proof of the fraudulent credit accounts he opened. She ordered him to attend anger management classes and said he could only have supervised visitation with the baby. His first supervised visit was a disaster from start to finish. The supervisor documented that he spent the entire hour scrolling through his phone while the baby cried and reached for me through the window. He kept repeating that this was ridiculous and I had turned everyone against him, and the supervisor wrote down every single word. When the hour was up, the baby practically jumped into my arms and Anthony stormed out without even saying goodbye to her. After the news story ran, women started coming out of nowhere with their own Anthony stories. 43 women total from 3 different gyms, 2 coffee shops, and even mothers from the prenatal classes I went to while pregnant. We created a private Facebook group where everyone shared screenshots and stories and realized he had the exact same pickup lines and patterns with everyone. I was packing up the apartment when I found our wedding album shoved in the back of the closet. The girl in white looked so young and happy and trusting and had no idea what was coming. Anoni's smile looked different now, predatory and fake and calculating. I kept one photo of me with my girlfriends where we were all laughing and glowing with hope, then threw the rest in the trash where they belonged. Dr. Park's custody evaluation report arrived 2 weeks later, recommending sole custody for me with supervised visitation, only for Anthony plus mandatory therapy. She noted concerning narcissistic traits and complete lack of parental bonding and said he showed no genuine interest in the baby's well-being. Anoni's lawyer immediately requested a second evaluation, but at the next court date, the judge shut it down. She set the final custody hearing for next month, and when she denied his request, Anthony literally stood up and stormed out of the courtroom. His lawyer ran after him, and we could hear shouting in the hallway before the lawyer came back in and told the judge he was withdrawing from the case because he didn't represent people who lied about evidence. So now Anthony was representing himself, which Monsieur Rodriguez said was actually good news because he would probably just keep making things worse for himself. The next morning, Ashley called me screaming that she found Anthony on 3 different dating apps, using photos of random babies from Google, claiming they were his daughter, and calling himself a devoted single dad who needed someone to help him heal from his ex-wife abandoning them. She screenshot everything and made a Twitter thread exposing him with side-by-side comparisons of the stolen baby photos and his dating profiles, where he wrote stuff about how hard it was being a single father and how his ex was mentally unstable. Within 6 hours, it had 50,000 retweets, and people were finding his LinkedIn and Facebook and commenting everywhere about what a pathetic liar he was. Marcus, the PI, called that same afternoon with something even worse because apparently Anthony had been married before in college for 3 months until it got annulled when his ex-wife filed a restraining order against him for stalking and harassment. How does someone manage to have 43 different women come forward with similar stories? The pattern with the same pickup lines across gyms and coffee shops makes me wonder if he kept notes or just naturally repeated himself without realizing it. She reached out through Marcus saying she wished someone had warned her back then and she would testify if we needed her to. 3 days later, Mia organized this huge fundraiser at the salon called Support Survivors, where they raised $15,000 for my legal fees. And when Anthony showed up outside with a cardboard sign saying, "Mob mentality destroyed my life," the police had to remove him while the local news filmed everything. His own family saw the news coverage, and Linda called me crying, saying they were staging an intervention without telling him where his sisters and aunts and even his 80-year-old grandmother wrote a letter to the judge about how he'd been manipulative and cruel since childhood. That's when Anthony completely lost it and sent an email to literally everyone in my contact list, including my boss and relatives and old college friends with intimate photos from our marriage, claiming I was mentally ill and had turned his family against him through manipulation. Ms. Rodriguez filed criminal harassment charges immediately, and my boss called within minutes, saying HR had seen everything and they were offering me paid leave plus a security escort when I returned to work. My female boss told me she escaped an abusive marriage 20 years ago and the whole company stood with me. I finally took the baby to the park for the first time in weeks, and she laughed at every dog that walked by and reached for flowers while other moms nodded at me knowingly, and one handed me coffee without saying a word. At the criminal harassment hearing, Anoni's ex-girlfriend from college testified over Zoom, describing the exact same patterns of love bombing, then isolation, then financial control, then escalation when she tried to leave. While the judge's face got harder with every detail she shared, the judge ruled criminal harassment was proven and issued a permanent restraining order, plus ordered Anthony to pay $25,000 in damages, while Anthony screamed it was a conspiracy and reverse sexism until the bailiffs dragged him out, still shouting about appealing. Meanwhile, Derrick dumped Rachel after she exposed those recordings, and she moved in with Jenna temporarily. So now we had this weird household of 2 women who exposed toxic men while our babies played together on the living room floor every day. 3 weeks passed like that until the court-ordered mediation appointment rolled around, and I walked into that cold conference room to find Anthony already sitting there with his lawyer looking smug as hell. The mediator started explaining how this was our chance to work things out without going to trial, but Anthony cut her off and leaned forward with this weird smile on his face. He actually said he would forgive me for everything if I just dropped the custody case and came back home like nothing happened. The mediator's pen stopped moving mid-sentence, while his own lawyer started shuffling papers, looking uncomfortable. Anthony kept going, explaining how I was hormonal and confused and needed his guidance to be a good mother and wife again. The mediator asked if he understood the criminal conviction and restraining order were already in place, but he waved his hand, saying those were misunderstandings that could be fixed. She closed her folder after 20 minutes and wrote something about bad faith participation, while Anthony kept insisting everyone was against him. 2 days later, I went back to work part-time and found my whole desk covered in sticky notes from coworkers with hearts and supportive messages. Walking through the office felt surreal after months of court dates and police reports and crying sessions. The bathroom stall became my pumping room 3 times a day, where I'd sit with that machine attached to me thinking about how different everything was now. My boss kept checking on me, and the receptionist brought me coffee without me asking, and everyone pretended not to notice when I had to leave early for lawyer meetings. The night before the final custody hearing, I couldn't eat anything, and the baby wouldn't sleep. Just kept grabbing my shirt and whining like she knew something big was happening. Jenna showed up first with wine I couldn't drink because of breastfeeding. Then Rachel came with her baby. Then Mia arrived with takeout nobody touched. Linda and Ashley knocked on the door together around 9 and we all just sat there not talking about tomorrow, just being together while the babies rolled around on blankets. Nobody left until after midnight, and Jenna slept on the couch just in case I needed anything. The morning came too fast and I threw up twice before getting dressed in the conservative outfit Miss Rodriguez suggested. At the courthouse, Anthony was already there with his parents, but Linda and his dad sat on my side of the courtroom refusing to look at him. He had a stack of printed papers from some men's rights website and kept arranging them on the defendant's table while people filed in. Missy Rodriguez had organized everything perfectly with 57 pieces of evidence in labeled folders and 14 witnesses, including neighbors who heard him screaming that night. The courtroom filled up with the salon women, Miss Bradley from the reunion, even the blonde girl Ashley, who'd thrown the drink in his face. The judge started reviewing everything while Anthony kept trying to interrupt with objections he'd learned from TV shows. She read through the custody evaluation that said he showed narcissistic tendencies and lack of parental investment, the criminal harassment conviction with all those text messages, the fraud evidence from the credit cards he'd opened. Anthony stood up, claiming it was all a conspiracy against fathers, but the judge threatened him with contempt if he didn't sit down and shut up. When it was my turn to testify, Anthony insisted on cross-examining me himself since he'd fired his lawyer that morning. He asked about my postpartum weight and whether I was still fat, how long I planned to breastfeed like it was weird, whether my mental state was stable enough for parenting. Miss Rodriguez objected to every single question while the judge looked more and more annoyed. Finally, the judge stopped him completely and said he was making his case worse with every word that came out of his mouth. Linda took the stand next, and her voice cracked when she said her own son was unfit to parent. She testified about only seeing him with the baby 3 times total, and each time he was on his phone, ignoring her crying. Anthony jumped up screaming that she was dead to him and he'd never forgive her betrayal. Security moved toward him while the judge ordered him removed from the courtroom for the remainder of the proceedings. We could hear him shouting in the hallway about his rights as a father while his own dad put his head in his hands. The judge took a 30-minute recess, but everyone knew what was coming from how she'd been looking at the evidence. When she came back, she delivered the verdict in this calm, clear voice that made everything feel final and real. I got sole legal and physical custody, with Anthony getting supervised visitation once a month, pending completion of a parenting class and therapy. He had to pay child support based on his actual income, not what he claimed, cover all my legal fees from both a divorce and custody battle, and maintain the restraining order for 3 years minimum. The judge called it one of the clearest cases she'd seen in her career and said the child's safety was her only concern. They brought Anthony back in for the ruling, and he completely lost it, throwing his printed papers everywhere and screaming about appeals and men's rights and feminist conspiracies. Security grabbed him as he yelled he'd never stop fighting for his daughter, even though he'd never even changed a diaper. The baby started crying from all the noise, and the judge added a psychological evaluation requirement before any visitation could start. Outside the courthouse, his new lawyer he'd hired that morning said they would definitely appeal, but Miss Rodriguez just smiled and said the appeals court would see the same evidence. The salon women surrounded me in this group hug while a local news reporter interviewed Mia about supporting women through divorce. Victory felt weird and hollow and amazing all at once. 1 week later, I was finally alone with my daughter for the first time since everything went down. No more court-appointed supervisors watching us eat breakfast or taking notes when I changed her diaper. That first morning, we walked to the park at 7 a.m., and she grabbed at every flower we passed. The afternoon nap happened right on schedule at 1:30, and I didn't spend the whole time checking the locks or jumping when cars drove by. Evening bath time turned into this whole slash fest with her new rubber ducks, and she laughed so hard she got hiccups. Linda started coming by once a week to help with laundry and groceries, but she never stayed longer than an hour. She told me she'd started therapy to deal with how she enabled Anthony all those years and brought up stuff about her own childhood I never knew about. We were both different people now, trying to build something better from all the broken pieces. The GoFundMe that Mia set up finally closed at $47,000. After all the news coverage died down after paying Miss Rodriguez and the court fees, there was enough left for a security deposit and first month's rent on a tiny apartment near downtown. Jenna took the day off work to help me move, and we loaded everything into her truck in 3 trips. The place was smaller than our old guest room, but it didn't have any memories of Anthony in the walls or his cologne smell in the closets. 2 weeks after the verdict, the court scheduled Anoni's first supervised visitation at this family center downtown. I got there 15 minutes early with the baby all dressed up in her yellow sundress with the daisies on it. The baby grabbing at every flower during their first walk alone makes me wonder if she somehow senses the freedom too. Like she's finally able to explore the world without all that tension around her. The supervisor waited with us for an hour, but Anthony never showed up. She wrote it all down in her official report while I took the baby to the park instead, where she pulled herself up on the bench and took 3 wobbly steps before falling on her butt. I recorded it on my phone but didn't send it to anyone, just kept it for us. Anoni's lawyer filed an appeal the next month, but it got denied in less than 2 weeks. Derrick stopped hanging out with him after Rachel posted all their group chat screenshots on Facebook and tagged their girlfriends. The whole brotherhood thing they had going fell apart when the consequences started hitting. Anthony moved back in with his parents and got a job at some used car dealership off the highway. 4 months after everything started, I went back to the salon for my first real haircut. Mia wouldn't let me pay, and all the women were there even though it was a Tuesday morning. Ashley was dating this guy who brought her flowers to work, and Jenna got promoted to regional manager at her company. Rachel had started therapy too and was working through her own stuff about picking unavailable men. We were all completely different people than we were that day. I came in crying about Anoni's text. A month after the verdict, I got a notice that Anthony hadn't paid any child support yet. Ms. Rodriguez filed for wage garnishment the same day, and within a week his new job was automatically deducting payments from his paycheck. He texted me from some new number calling me vindictive and saying I was ruining his life, but I just blocked it without responding. The baby said mama for the first time during breakfast one random Thursday morning. She reached for me with her little hands and said it clear as day while yogurt dripped down her chin. I cried into my coffee and sent the video to Linda and the salon group chat. 30 heart emojis came back within a minute, along with voice messages of everyone screaming at the pediatrician's office for her 15-month checkup. I ran into James from high school with his wife and their son. His wife was actually really sweet and invited us for a play date at their house the next weekend. There wasn't any weird tension or old feelings, just 2 parents talking about sleep schedules and teething while our kids played with blocks. The world had good men in it. I just picked the wrong one and stayed too long. 6 months after the reunion, I sat at my kitchen table filling out preschool applications while the baby napped in her crib. My phone buzzed with the salon group planning a girls' night for Friday at this new wine bar downtown. Outside my window, people walked their dogs and carried groceries and lived their normal lives. Inside, we were safe and stable and starting over. The signed divorce papers sat on my counter in a manila envelope, ready for Monday's mail. This is what freedom felt like. Just ordinary mornings and quiet afternoons and nobody making me feel small. The baby monitor showed her stirring and I went to get her, thinking about what we'd have for lunch and maybe another walk to the park. No more checking my phone for angry texts or walking on eggshells or crying in bathroom stalls. Just us two figuring it out one day at a time. Building something better than what we left behind. Thanks for exploring all this with me. Seriously, it's been awesome digging into these questions together. Can't wait for our next curious adventure. Like the video, it helps more than you think.